All right. Welcome, everybody. Hope everybody's enjoying this Memorial Day weekend. And we have a little bit of a shorter presentation this week for it, but we'll start off with a couple discussions about Memorial Day. We have the Veterans Agent, Ken Banisher, here, and a very special guest, General Jack Hammond. And then we'll follow that up with State Senator Paul Feeney, State Rep Jim Hawkins, and that'll do it for this week. So without further ado, I'm going to hand things over to Ken Banisher to talk a little bit about Memorial Day. Welcome, Ken.
Thank you for having me, Todd, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here and joined by the esteemed panel that you've put together here, and the opportunity to address Attleboro. Something that really sort of drives home the point of what Memorial Day is to me in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic is something that I read from this morning at the Hillside Cemetery when we maintained our 137-year streak of having that sunrise ceremony held. It's the longest one in our area for sure. It's probably not the longest one in the country, but at least 137 years continuous is a pretty good record, and we didn't want to see that go broken. So we were joined by about 35 people this morning, which was probably triple what I was expecting, or the number of people that I had invited. But that itself was a testament to the patriotism of the Attleboro community. And what I read from there was a warning order from Governor Baker. It says, "Please be advised that Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker has ordered that on Monday, May 25th, 2020, the United States of America flag and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts flag at all state buildings will be lowered to half staff from sunrise until noon and be displayed at full staff from noon until sunset in honor of Memorial Day." And it goes on to say which buildings specifically that gubernatorial order applies to. The catch is that in Attleboro, our flags have been at half staff for quite some time now. And I didn't take the time to dig up the exact date, but it was around March. It was the third or fourth week of March when the governor issued the order to put it at half staff in honor of the soldiers that we've lost, the veterans that we've lost from the soldiers' homes at Chelsea and Holyoke. And those deaths number over 70 at this point. The news articles have stopped beating up the state about it because it is under investigation as to what's happened. But the short version of the story is that those are nursing homes, and assisted living and nursing home facilities are some of the hardest hit places for the COVID-19 pandemic more generally. It's just extra heartbreaking because these are our veterans. These are our men and women that have stepped up to serve our country and did so honorably. And the COVID-19 just went through those facilities and ravaged them. And so to send out that Memorial Day notice, that's tradition. It's lower the flags to half staff until noon in honor of the fallen, and then you raise it up to full staff at noon to proceed as normal and continue with the day. But that's just, again, that really just struck me as one area that really sort of speaks to how the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted our traditions and continues to disrupt literally everything that we do. So it was heartbreaking not to have a Memorial Day parade. It was heartbreaking not to have the series of ceremonies that we usually have throughout the entire weekend, and to get to see all of the folks that usually sign up and join us for those. But we've adapted. The military mantra is adapt and overcome. And so here we are virtually, and AACS put together a really great program to be aired tomorrow as well. And that's just how we're going to beat this. Is we're going to remain resilient. We're going to adapt and overcome. But at the same time, the importance of Memorial Day cannot be forgotten. We cannot forget that the reason that our country has the ability to be so resilient to combat something as fearsome as an epidemic like this is because of those freedoms that our veterans have fought for and earned, and the prosperity that has gone along with that. So I believe, Todd, that you've got a video on deck from one of our more heartfelt traditions, and I apologize if I caught you a little bit off guard there, but one of my favorite traditions at the Memorial Day ceremonies is this is usually what we do on Memorial Day, right after the parade every year. We'll meet at Capron Park, where there's a number of memorials dedicated to veterans. And for many years, an Air Force veteran, Ray Oberg, just a tremendous man and ardent supporter of the community. He would do a rendition of the Ragged Old Flag. And that has really stuck with us as tradition goes. And so I believe that we've got one of his best performances on deck here. So take it away, Todd, if you're ready.
One day I stopped at a little town, I don't remember where, and took a leisurely walk through a county courthouse square. And on a park bench, an elderly man was sitting there. I said, "Your courthouse is getting a mite run down." He says, "No, it'll do just fine for our little town." And I said, "I see your flagpole's leaned a little bit, and that's a ragged old flag hanging from it." He said, "Have a seat." And I sat down. "This the first time you've been in our little town?" I said, "I think it is." He says, "Well, I don't like to brag, but we're kind of proud of that ragged old flag. You see, we got a little hole in that flag there when Washington took it across the Delaware. And it got powder burned the night that Francis Scott Key sat watching it, writing, 'Say, can you see?' It got a rip at New Orleans with Pakenham and Jackson tearing at its seams. And it almost fell at the Alamo besides the Texas flag, but it waved on, though. It got cut with a sword at Chancellorsville, and cut again at Shiloh Hill. There was Robert E. Lee and Burnham and Bragg. Oh, the south wind blew mighty hard on that ragged old flag. Near Flanders Field in World War I, she got another hole from a Bertha gun. And she turned blood red in World War II and hung limp and low a time or two. She's been in Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan. She went where she was sent by her Uncle Sam. She waved from our ships on the briny foam, but folks have about quit waving back here at home. In our good old land here, she's been abused, she's been burned, defiled, despised, and refused. And the government for which she stands has sometimes been scandalized throughout the land. Yep, she's getting a little old and wearing a mite thin, but she's in pretty good shape for the shape she's in, 'cause she's been through the fire before, and I believe she can be there a long lot more. So we raise her up each morning, and we take her down real slow at night. Oh, we don't let her touch the ground, and we fold her up just right. On second thought, friend, I do like to brag, 'cause I'm mighty darn proud of that ragged old flag.
It gives me goosebumps every time.
Love that. Yeah, absolutely. All right. So where were we?
I think that I'd just like to close my remarks in saying that just as the tradition with the raising the flag up at noon, lowering it in the morning, and raising it up at noon, it's important to remember those who've gone before us. It's extremely important to remember the fallen and those who paid the ultimate sacrifice for our freedoms. but it's also important to remember those who are still with us. And I think that really speaks to the significance of raising up the flag at noon. And so I think General Hammond is going to talk a great deal about what we can do for those who are still with us. But the Attleboro Veteran Services Department has a great deal of resources for veterans and their family members. And I want folks to keep that in mind during these trying times, that we stand ready. We stand by to assist. So thank you again, Todd, for the opportunity to address.
Thank you. And so without further ado, General Hammond, he is the executive director of the home-based program. I believe also the director for Boston Hope. But more importantly to me personally, he was the brigade commander for the Yankee Division while we were over in Afghanistan. And it is truly an honor to have you with us, General Hammond. Welcome.
Thanks, Todd. And you know, that was just an amazing rendition of the ragged old flag. It never gets old listening to that. That gentleman really put his heart and soul into it. That was really impressive. Well, I just want to say my hat's off to the folks in Attleboro for continuing the tradition and upholding it. As we know, back in 1868, when this recognition began, it really started with just taking some time, placing some flowers and flags and recognizing the fallen. But as we move into this post-COVID environment, we're really beginning to see how folks really need to get back together. You've probably seen around town folks sitting on their porches more, taking walks more, stopping to talk to people more. So I always try and find those silver linings. I learned from one of my first commanders many years ago. You know, life can be tough, but it's even worse if you let it. And if you can try and find that positive thing and find that silver lining. And just as a side note, you know, first time we talked about that, you know, we were sitting there and it was kind of misty, raining, and we've been out for a few days. And he said, well, you know, at least it's not snow. And the next time we talked, and we were doing some winter operations, and I said, well, we got the snow, sir. And he said, yeah, but if it was freezing rain, it would be worse. And so no matter how I did it, he always showed me there was a silver lining. And I like to think the silver lining that's kind of coming from all of this is people are slowing the train down a bit, and they're reconnecting with their neighbors and their friends and families in a different way. And I think what you're doing here by keeping this alive, be it virtual ceremonies, you know, it's still keeping it alive and it's keeping people connected. We often talk at home base about the fact, Kipling talked about the strength of the wolf is the pack and the strength of the pack is the wolf. We've learned that in the military. And I think for many veterans, when they come home, they're not part of that pack anymore. And that's where the challenges start to come on. As Todd knows, we served with some great soldiers in Afghanistan, and in my previous deployments in Iraq. We knew that we all had each other's back overseas, and we had faith and confidence that everybody would watch out for everybody, and you're part of this big team. And we lose people, and we lost people. It was a real kick in the gut. It was a real hardship. Todd may have shared, we had a mass casualty event. It was one of the largest in the war. We lost 17 troops and 1 suicide bomb. And I can tell you, it took a whole, you know, command together, leaning on each other to make sure that we didn't let that take us into a really dark place, because again, we were all with each other. We were all supporting each other. Interestingly enough, and in a very sad note, I had 3 combat commands overseas, and I've lost more people to suicide back home than I did in 3 combat commands. And that's kind of one of the keynotes of these wars that presented some huge challenges for us back here, because we know we can do better. When you lose a soldier to combat, that's one of the tragedies of war. When you lose a soldier to peace after they've survived the crucible of combat, that is just an utter failure of our government to safeguard them when they come home and provide the resources to care for them properly. And I know there's tremendous efforts being made at different levels, and each year, each month, we do get better at it. But frankly, the mental health and brain injuries associated with combat weren't even anything we looked at back in 2003. 2004, 2005. It wasn't until around 2007 we really recognized that we had some pretty big challenges. When folks got blown up in 2003 and they walked away from it, they didn't think there's a traumatic brain injury, much like professional football players get into these collisions and they don't think that there's long-term effects. But we've seen that now. And I was very fortunate after retiring in 2012 to be asked by the owners of the Red Sox and leadership at Mass General to take on a program leading Home Base, which is a partnership between those two great organizations. And strangely enough, it was the idea for Home Base began with Tom Werner, who's one of the owners of the Red Sox. And it came as a result of a visit to Walter Reed Army Medical Center after the Red Sox World Series victory in 2007. That spring, as you know, they all go back to the White House for a meet and greet. But one of the most important aspects for them was going to Walter Reed in 2008. And if you think about that in the time frame, it was at the height of the surge. And so we had probably the highest numbers of catastrophically injured soldiers at Walter Reed at that time. The Red Sox planned to go there for about an hour. They stayed 5. When they walked out of there, they were incredibly impacted. Tom Werner, in particular, his dad was part of Normandy. David Ginsburg was a minority owner. His father was kept as a prisoner of war. If you saw the movie Unbroken, he was held as a prisoner of war in that same prison camp. So there was a pretty strong tie with the Red Sox, and there always has been, as you know. A number of Red Sox have served in combat and so forth. But these guys, the new owners, wanted to build something, and they did. They started the seed funding with Mass General, and this program that back in 2002 when I got there was seeing roughly 200 people a year, all services paid for at no cost to the veterans. We now see 2,000 veterans each year. And we had to do a pivot in March, just like everybody else. And for the past 2 months, we've been delivering treatment through virtual therapy, which we're finding new and better ways to deliver that. Over the past decade, Home Base has provided care and support to more than 25,000 veterans, actively serving members of the military and military family members, all affected with mental health and brain injuries associated with their combat service, or in the case of their family members, their service to the nation by supporting their soldiers. Pretty difficult time. We include a program specifically designed for Gold Star families. We work with a national organization called TAPS, Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors. We created a program where we bring the wives of service members and veterans who killed themselves into Home Base for a 14-day program, and it's the only one in the nation for them. For those that don't know, they really don't have any true benefits when their service member dies. They do have some TRICARE, depending on what went on, but there's no medical program to deal with fallen soldiers. And as you can imagine, with the suicide piece, these spouses that come to Home Base, almost every one of them either witnessed a suicide or walked in and found it. And that's as bad as trauma as any soldier goes through. Finding your husband hanging in a room or blown up in the living room or the kitchen table. So Home Base, just as background for you all, has a number of great programs that we've been able to extend the reach of the program outside of Metro Boston so that you don't just come into Boston for care. We created a 14-day clinical program that compresses 2 years of therapy into 14 days. And we cover the transportation into Boston. We put them up in a hotel at the Marriott. We work with them from 8 in the morning to 8 at night for 14 days straight. And they are able, we bring folks, some of the most injured people from across the United States and actually the world. We've flown in 2 folks from Japan, a few from Guam, and 6 from Europe that are U.S. veterans that happen to be working overseas. And we brought veterans from all 54 states and territories to Home Base over the past 6 years through this program. We have a special program for our special operations forces for traumatic brain injury. We piloted last year where we had 70 special operators, primarily Navy SEALs. The command team from SEAL Team 6 asked us to put that one together. And we have 250 special operators in the queue to try and come see us to go through the traumatic brain injury program we have. What's remarkable about Home Base is we draw all our clinical teams from Harvard, Mass General, and Spalding Rehab. And so we have access to some of the best folks. So it's a pretty incredible program. I would strongly urge you, if you do encounter any veterans that need our help, to please get them in contact with us. Todd knows Bill Davidson. Bill Davidson is a retired command sergeant major. I recruited Bill a few years back, and he leads our veteran outreach team. They're the first point of contact with home base, and their job is to, connect the veteran with the program, stay with them as they go through it. It's almost like a patient navigator and a peer supporter, and then stay with them afterwards. If we can get someone into home base, we can save them. The suicide rate right now, as we all know, is way too high. And I think with all that's going on with COVID, it's not a good environment for veterans that need the care that they can't seem to get in some places. We are a partner with the VA. I'm not a VA basher. They have an untenable position with all the debt they have, with all the real estate. No matter how much money we seem to give them, not enough that goes directly to the care people need. And there's still some challenges out there. So we work with the VA. The VA refers patients to us, and we have a VA social worker permanently assigned to home base. And that was a deal we struck with the Secretary of the VA 4 years ago. And we got a great guy who's a Massachusetts veteran, who's a VA social worker permanently assigned with us, so that we can connect veterans that come to home base with the VA support system. So I would just open it up that we've got a number of virtual programs that we can connect veterans to, that today we don't have to, we've never closed since the March shutdown of everything. So we've been seeing probably 200 veterans a week through our telehealth programs. And we'll be cranking up our 14-day and 5-day intensive clinical programs probably in July. The last thing I just want to share with you, back in late March, the governor called me and asked me to stand up a 1,000-bed hospital in Boston. And I can tell you, when the governor calls you and asks you to do something like that during a pandemic, there's only one answer: yes, Roger out, we'll do it. Love, happy to do it, sir. My question was, how do you build a 1,000-bed hospital? And we wanted it done in 7 days, and then staff it when you can't take anybody from the hospital systems that I work with. So it seemed like a bit of an insurmountable task. I immediately reached out to Dr. Ehrlichman. Todd knows Dr. Ehrlichman. He was one of the surgeons assigned to Task Force Yankee. He's also an MGH surgeon. And then I reached back to Bill Davidson, Command Sergeant Major Davidson. And home base, right now has 52 home base employees that have been detailed over to help stand up and operate Boston Hope. And bringing those veterans in who are used to working in an expeditionary environment and asked to build with nothing and create with no resources, something as amazing as this. The only other 1,000-bed hospital in Massachusetts or New England is Mass General. If you look at a lot of the county hospitals right now, they have about 250 beds in them. We had 3 crews a day building 1,000 beds. And when I say beds, each one is a room with 3 sheetrock walls, copper piping for oxygen and power. It's a remarkable thing. If you haven't seen it, it's worth taking a peek at. But you can see what's possible. Suffolk Construction did it, but they worked with the unions in Boston and put together 3 shifts a day. And in 7 days, Boston Hope was created. Since its birth, we've seen almost 800 people, all COVID positive. About just a little under 400 of them have gone to the acute and subacute clinical side. We have 6 intensive care beds. And then we also have a 500-bed facility that took people that were COVID positive and unsheltered. And by that, they were a combination of homeless people and people that were COVID positive that couldn't stay home anymore. An amazing partnership between the state, the city, the federal government. We had an Army hospital unit come in right off the jump street. In 3 days, they were operational and seeing patients. We've got 60 National Guard members there providing security alongside the state police and the Boston police. Remarkable situation. But I can tell you, the 3-star Boston Police Deputy Superintendent is an Army Reserve Lieutenant Colonel. And as we looked across the spectrum, one of the lead elements from the city of Boston was one of their lawyers who's on Army JAG. And as we went across each one of these areas, it was veterans helping to lead this and taking the skills they learned in the military and then bringing them to the private sector and the public sector to help create something out of nothing and start saving lives. And I can tell you, as you all know, they're used to working 18-hour days, bad food, no sleep, in a really not great environment in one of the most COVID positive places in Massachusetts, and not one of them flinched. So I couldn't have been more proud of them. And I tell you, each of you would be proud of the way the veterans took this one on and really made something out of nothing and helped save a lot of lives once again. So with that, I'll just take a pause, and if anyone's got any questions, I'd be happy to answer them on either.
That's absolutely incredible work with the Boston Hope, and we have just such tremendous talent here in Massachusetts and with the Massachusetts National Guard and Reserves. I'm sure you're aware General Merlino was down in DC coordinating, standing up all of these hospitals across the country, and it's incredible work, and it's great to hear all of that. One of the things that I wanted to mention and that we share each week is we're always telling people that if you need help, ask for help. And it's something that had been heard from you and heard from people in the military over and over again, especially with the suicide rates and all of that. If you need help, ask for help. And it's been interesting to think about the parallels between a bunch of sort of alpha male military members that would be a little more hesitant to ask for help and need that constant reminder to ask for help. Now with so many people unemployed and heads of households that through no fault of their own find themselves in these tough predicaments, we've been just encouraging people to ask for help. And a lot of that comes from the military training and the leadership I've received through the military. So thank you for that. That's all I have. Does anyone else have questions for General Hammond?
Counselor, if I could, General Hammond, Paul Feeney, I'm the state senator here in the Bristol and Norfolk district. And I just want to thank you. I know my colleague, Senator Timothy, who chairs the Veterans Affairs Committee, he speaks so highly of you and the work that you do at home base. And I know Representative Hawkins, who's on here as well, his colleague, Representative Linda Dean Campbell, the chair of that committee, they've seen firsthand the work that you do. And I know you've been committed to, really taking the team and going all over the Commonwealth to make sure that people know what home base can do. And I was just wondering, for regular folks like us, people in the city of Attleboro, how can we help? Is there something that we can do to help the work that you do at home base? Can we donate, anything like that?
Well, obviously, anytime you can help us with the fundraising, we're 95% based on philanthropy, and we're going to go into some tough times. So any support there, the state has been fantastic. As you know, the state has started supporting home base through our suicide prevention program. And what's nice about that one, that's a program where when the money came to home base, but then it was used to build capacity across the state. Last year, we were able to train 75 clinicians that live outside of Boston, all over the state, and we created 10 community clusters. And Senator Timothy was instrumental in setting one up in Norfolk County. We did it up in the Western Mass, Central Mass, North Shore, South Shore, and we built teams together. But what you guys do that's so important is you're building that wolf pack in your area. You're building that community. And there's two parts to the coin, though, you have to keep an eye on, at least from my perspective. Number one, the folks that you do know that are veterans, keep an eye on them. And when somebody's not doing well, you got to say something, and can't be squeamish about it, because when you get into mental health issues, people do get squeamish. They don't know, should I butt in? Should I say something? I would tell you, having lost so many good friends and comrades to suicide, you don't want to. I'd rather have them mad at me than lose them. And so I always say, get in there. The other one that's harder to find, and we're trying to crack the nut on this one, how do we get to those veterans that don't self-identify? You know what I mean? How do we find them and get them connected? Because probably only half the veterans in the country register with the VA, register with the town. And so getting that grassroots thing is the only way to success on this one. And so the more vigilant you can be to identify these folks, especially when you see someone in town that you know that's not doing well, if you can peel the onion back that 1 inch and find out they were a veteran, then we can open that door, and it helps you figure out what's going on. And once we know what's going on, if we can get them into home base opened up to all combat eras 3 years ago, and it doesn't require wartime service. There's plenty of folks that got injured peacetime in the military and have had some, have lost folks in training accidents and everything else in the world. And so if they're a veteran, regardless of their combat status, and they need help for, mental health or brain injury, we're a resource. And what's great about home base is there is no cost. There's not a lot of paperwork. They just have to show us something that verifies they're a veteran. Then that's the DD 214 that shows that they served. On the military family side, they just have to tell us they are. In 10 years, we've not had somebody come in and try and pretend to be a military family member and try and get free help. So it hasn't happened yet. So it's a self-identified thing. The more you can do to help connect people to the care is great. And then obviously your continued support in the legislature on the initiatives that we're working. One of the things we may promote this year, and the Secretary Sutters has asked a few questions. We may try and figure out if we can help in some way with the frontline healthcare providers. If you guys have probably heard some of these horrific stories, like imagine the folks working at Holyoke and what they saw with 75, 80 amazing veterans dying and no family member being there to comfort them. 1 or 2 a year when you work at an elderly facility, because you get emotionally attached to these guys, but 80 in this one senseless period of time. And then all the folks working in all the acute care facilities in Boston and around the state that had, they knew 8 out of 10 people that went on a ventilator was not going to come off the ventilator alive. The trauma associated with that is, that's the war at home. And so we're trying to figure out how we can better support that. And we'll be working with the legislature and HHS to try and figure out, based on 10 years of experience, what can we do to support our frontline care workers here in the home war.
Great. Thank you, General.
Thank you.
Thank you, General Hammond. Perfect. So moving on, next up, we have Senator Feeney.
Thank you so much, Todd. What is it? Number 12 we're
Number
on?
12, yes.
And it's always good having the Brigadier General on tonight. We've had a couple of generals on these calls, and every time we do, Todd, I notice you're squared away a little bit. You sit up a little bit straighter, and so it's always good to have command on as well. But I want to thank the General, and as always, Ken. Ken is, I've said many times, one of the best VSOs in the state, and not only performs his job expertly, but really with the compassion that is so needed with somebody in a job like that. So thank you, Ken, for all you're doing. I know you get a busy weekend, despite the fact that we're not having a parade or the traditional ceremonies. I know you get a busy weekend on Memorial Day as always. So I appreciate the work that you do. Todd, we're on here every week talking about kind of just giving an update on the public health side of things, and then we get a little bit into some of the ancillary issues when it comes to the mitigation effects that we're having due to COVID-19. So I just wanted to lead again by letting everybody know, as legislators, both Representative Hawkins and I, focused intently on the public health aspect of this, making sure that we're managing that correctly, making sure that we're working closely with the governor and the administration, Secretary of HHS and the command center, who are really driving the bus on this and making sure that we're responding appropriately. And one of the things that they've done, and this has changed over the last few months as we've been on here talking every week, is created this dashboard. And this dashboard basically takes all this raw data that they aggregate each and every day, and it puts it into a pretty simple, easy to understand presentation so that folks can actually see the various indices that we're looking at. When you're talking about COVID-19, there's all sorts of different metrics that you really need to understand. Number one, we've talked so many times that the raw number of daily cases, that's going to go up and down based on how many people we're testing. So it's a good snapshot in time for that particular day. But what we're really looking at is what are the positive percentages based on testing each day that gives us kind of a clearer idea of the spread of the virus. Second thing that we're looking at, obviously, is hospitalizations to really get an understanding of the acuity of the virus and what's going on a daily basis in each of the communities. Are hospitalizations increasing? Are they decreasing? And we've gotten to a place where we've announced over the last couple of weeks on this call that, we're trending in the right direction, where more people are going home each day than are actually getting admitted to the hospital. So that's a good point, to really hammer home, because this has all been about managing that surge and making sure that hospitals that are at surge capacity have the resources necessary to be able to treat people that are sick. So trending in the right direction. Today, we're at about 9.1% positive tests, which is good. That's trended downward over the last couple of months now. So we're in a good spot with that. About 2,169 people currently hospitalized, 558 in the ICU. Again, all good numbers as it relates to where we've been. So again, these numbers are all relative. We're looking at trends. The raw numbers are good. The raw data is good, but we're really looking at trends over time. So overall, we've seen downward trends in all the different metrics that the experts are looking at. The thing to caution, and the reason why I always bring it up, is because that has been with an unprecedented, never before seen mitigation of essentially, ordering everybody to stay at home over the last couple of months. We've been able to manage the surge because of that, quite frankly. So what does that mean now that we're going to start to open up? Well, the experts say that we probably will see a bit of an increase, that there probably will be some days where we start to see a trend going the other way. But it's really important to look at this over a course of time so that we can understand what it looks like when we're reopening the economy based on phases. And this is something that we got into in detail last week when we spoke about the reopening. But really, you got to pay attention to that reversion clause on the reopening. That's so important. The governor and the administration have been very clear that if we start to see more downward trends, there is a reversion clause to say, hey, look, we got to roll it back a little bit. And if things start to, continue to trend in the positive direction, then that's another indicator that, great, we can open up more, we can move to the next phase with proper, guidance and social distancing and hygiene and things like that. We can start moving rapidly through the phases. So we continue to look at those metrics going forward. Again, positive directions right now. Personally, I'm a little bit worried that, we're going to start to see a little bit of a spike from day to day as we reopen and people are moving back to kind of their normal lives, whether it's using public transportation or congregating elsewhere, where they haven't done that the last couple of months. So we'll keep an eye on that. And I just want to just quickly hit on what it's going to look like going forward. So last week we talked about the reopening of the economy, certain sectors and industries that we're going to be reopening this week, and then going through the phases. And everybody's out there hearing about, and I get questions on all the time, well, what is the testing? Where do we want to be on testing and why? What is this tracing stuff, right? When we talk about contact tracing. And it's important to note, and I know I don't want to beat a dead horse. Hopefully folks have heard this or understood it or read into it. The big factor when you talk about a contagious virus like this is what they call the R-naught factor, right? R-naught, N-A-U-G-H-T. And the R-naught factor sometimes is known as the reproduction number. Essentially, how quickly does this virus spread? And when you look at deadly viruses or pandemics or other viruses that we've dealt with over the years, they're all assigned an R-naught factor based on the formula, that the experts look at to figure out how quickly the virus spreads. Just to give you kind of an example here. So right now, the COVID-19 R-naught factor is about 2.5. Now, this varied greatly when we started to see the spread in other parts of the world because there really wasn't much robust testing going on. So it was difficult to kind of tell. And the contact tracing was basically non-existent. Now that we have more data points to actually look at, the COVID-19 R-naught factor is about 2.5. And that came from Dr. Walensky at Mass General Hospital, who I had a briefing with the other day. Now, put that into perspective, the flu is about 1.3. Measles is 17. So what does that mean? Well, it's the reason why when we see a positive measles case in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, everybody mobilizes, right? We try and figure out, okay, who did you talk to? Where were you? who is around you, because it's so contagious. When you're talking about an R0 factor of 17, that means that in a normal environment, if I'm a carrier, I'm going to infect on average 17 people with that virus. The flu is 1.3. So if I have the flu and everybody on this call doesn't have it, the average, I'm going to infect an average of 1.3 people, right? So when you think about it like that, and you understand that reproduction factor, the R0 factor, indicates how quickly it spreads. Think about COVID-19 at about 2.5. That means in normal environment, I'm going to infect 2.5 people. But then those 2.5 people are then going to go out and infect 2.5 people, and so on and so on. That's why we don't see a linear increase in COVID-19. It's exponential. Now, if you look at viruses and you figure out, okay, if there's an R0 factor of 1, then the virus sticks around and it's steady, but it doesn't grow exponentially. If it's under 1, eventually the virus dies out. If I'm a carrier and I infect on average less than 1 person, the virus dies. When you start to see it go over 2, that's when you see exponential growth, which is why COVID-19, we've had to do so much to try and mitigate this. So I hear from folks all the time that say, Paul, this is nothing more than just a flu. It's a lot more contagious than a flu, And we've seen the acuity on this and the severity of this is a lot worse for a lot of people. So I just want to kind of quickly hit on that, and then talk a little bit about herd immunity, which I've heard so many people from. I got some emails from Attleboro last week asking me, well, shouldn't we just all go out and get it, right? Like the chicken pox theory, let's all have a COVID-19 party, and, we'll do it over in Cobus's kitchen, and everybody from Attleboro will come over, and, we'll get COVID-19 and expose ourselves without exposing, vulnerable people, folks with pre-existing conditions or senior citizens in the community. And that way we'll build herd immunity. Well, you're talking for herd immunity based on the R0 factor that we know about. You're looking at roughly between 60 and 65% of the population that would have to be exposed to COVID-19. We can do that if we are able to accept the fact that there will be hundreds and thousands of deaths. It's just the way it is. That's the science behind this. That's the data. That's what it shows. So it becomes, what is your acceptable level of risk as an individual and really as a community and as a society? So if we decide we're going to try and hit 60, 65% of people infected, well, we're going to see a lot of people dying, including young people, including children, and a lot of senior citizens, and a lot of the folks that we're doing our best to, honor this weekend, folks that did make it home, and veterans of many, many wars. So difficult, choices to make going forward. But I think as a society, we're at a point where, we need to weigh the risk reward, and the risk, at least in my opinion, of having many, many more deaths is just too much to take. So, so that's what we're looking at when you talk about, trying to get herd immunity. Just again, to put it in a little bit of perspective, if we do get a vaccine, and the idea being that the R0 factor, that you can actually affect that by, if the virus is going to spread, but people start to develop either immunity to it, or we have a vaccine, then obviously it becomes less and less of an issue, like we've seen with other coronaviruses, like we've seen with Ebola, like we've seen with SARS, like we've seen with H1N1. So without a vaccine, to get to herd immunity is almost impossible, number one, and you have a lot of deaths. But number two, even when we developed a vaccine, when we look at the flu, which we have a seasonal vaccine now for the flu every single year, about 40 to 55% generally each year of people actually get the vaccine for the flu. So if we're only going to have 40% of the people actually get the vaccine for COVID-19, we're still going to have a lot of work to do to make sure that we're actually lowering the spread of this infection. So, my kind of, and again, I was a telephone worker who became a legislator. I'm not a doctor, but just being in so many briefings over the last couple of weeks, I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about that, because I know there's a lot of folks in the community that, have all sorts of questions and say, hey, why are we doing so much? Why are we shutting down schools? Why are we shutting down daycares? why are we letting unemployment get to 22, 23% in the Commonwealth? Why are we blowing a $6 billion hole in the state budget? And really, it's one of those questions that it's risk reward, right? And if this is the acceptable risk that we're willing to take to save lives, then, that's where we're at. So happy Memorial Day to everybody. I know folks are doing, all sorts of stuff in Attleboro this weekend to remember our fallen in different ways. I wish we could be back together again and having a parade and meeting down at Cape Ron Park. I know we'll get there soon, and we'll be back as a community together someday soon. But, to all those folks that are out there trying to do their best to remember our fallen this week, whether it's putting a flag outside, decorating the grave, going and putting flowers at a headstone of a loved one, or even somebody that you just never knew, but want to honor them. Thank you for what you're doing. I hope everybody has a great and enjoyable summer, and please, please, please be safe out there. Thanks so much, Todd.
Thank you, Paul. That was a little bit too much math for me, for my feeble brain, but no, that was every week you explain is always informative, and I appreciate it. And I think that was one of the clearest and best explanations I've heard for R0 and a variety of things. So thank you so much. Every week is very informative.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Representative Hawkins. Jim, welcome.
Okay, now I did it. Okay. First of all, it is Memorial Day weekend, and it seems odd not to see Ken running around with 13 events every day for how many days in a row. Something's just wrong with this story. But I want to thank Jim Jones and Ken for finding another way when we can't get together, another way to commemorate this day, and for Ken to keep up the tradition of 130 some odd years at Hillside Cemetery also, and the other celebration of Memorial Day. It's so important, and I'm glad we found a way to do it. And thank you to both of you. And Todd, I never know who's listening. I know there's just 6 of us on the screen, but I know there's other people listening, and they may not all realize what a big deal this is, that this is number 12, how much work you put into this. And we have, in the House, we have daily meetings with other House members, and every now and then somebody will pipe up and say, oh, we just had this great video conference, and they can say, well, we're on our 12th one. And we have different guests every week, always somebody that people want to hear from. So good job with that. And interesting to listen to General Hammond talking about suicide. I was planning before the pandemic hit to have a forum on suicides with John Bandel, who's commander of one of the local posts of VFW. It'll be at Carty's Furniture. We're still going to do it, but we have to wait until people can get together again. So I don't know when that's going to be, but that's on the agenda. But I guess the biggest thing going on that I could share about is the food drive, which is going to be June 6 and June 7. The need has grown significantly. I haven't talked to the food pantries. I know that the Food and Friends that does the meals to go at Baptist Church is up to 150 families a night now, where they were doing 40 or 45. They're stacking cars differently at Hebron Food Pantry. They don't line them up, they put them in the parking places. So I don't know how that looks, but I'm sure it's about the same. And this is all happening at the same time that they haven't had their outdoor fundraisers. They have had fundraisers, but not the same ones they usually do. And Greater Boston Food Bank is no different than the stores we go to. There's empty shelves, there's things missing. And some of that's due to interruptions in the food production, and some of that's introductions. I always think about the tractor trailers that carry furniture one way and bring food the other way. Well, they don't have the load of furniture, so just the distribution itself is messed up. So, and that's not changing anytime soon. This food drive on June 6 and 7 will be a benefit for Hebron Food Pantry, for St. Joseph's Food Pantry, for St. Teresa's Food Pantry, for Murray Church. And also this time we're adding, there's some shortage of food for the Food and Friends that does the meals to go weekday nights at the Baptist Church. And there's some pieces missing for the summer eats for the kids when school closes. So the list will be a little different. What they need that the food pantry doesn't is more single serving things, fruit bowls, little bags of chips, stuff like that. We're working on the graphic that will have that, plus the regular, the non-perishable goods for the food pantry, the pasta, paper goods, all of that. The need is so great, and all of these organizations need our help. Compliments to you, Todd. You're part of this, and Senator Feeney, and Jay Delicio, and Heather Perica, and I. What a great group you are to work with. We we do laugh, but it's low key, no egos there. We all know something's got to be done, and I think the community respects that. So June 6 and June 7, it'll be in the newspaper. It'll be on AACS. It'll be on social media, Facebook, and so forth. But please remember that this is the third time we've done it, and we need the city to come through again. So thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Yeah, we have a wonderful team, and it's great to work with everybody and see everybody step up. So normally we would have Steve Withers give an update from Attleboro Public Schools. He had a family emergency come up, but the one thing he wanted to communicate was that there's new guidance from the state about graduations, and they had a tentative plan that they were looking at. But with this new guidance, things have changed, and they're going to be re-looking at what they need to do for graduation. Let me share the screen real quick here. So the big thing is that ceremonies held between now and July 18th should be held virtually, and anything from the 19th forward can be held outside and stuff, assuming public health data supports the continued opening of our state. So based on that new guidance that came out, the school committee and school superintendent are looking at that and trying to figure out how they want to act. So that was the update for Attleboro Public Schools. Does anybody have anything else? All right. Happy Memorial Day, and stay safe out there. Thank you.
Thank you.